Hello? Get it down far enough there. Okay. Welcome, everybody. My name's Eva Navarro St. John. I'm the Vice President of the Doña Ana County Genealogical Society. Do we have any guests here today? If you don't mind, could you state your name and where you're from? Oh, okay. Yeah, I want to meet you. Anybody else? Okay, great. Did I miss somebody? Oh, yeah, the sign-in sheet. If you didn't get to sign the sign-in sheet when you came in, if you could please sign that, we'd be very appreciative. Oh. Okay, well, I'll start with introductions. Our speakers, I should say, Scott Kraling is the Doña Ana County Clerk. He has worked in the Clerks Office since 2013. Before that, he was a Doña Ana County Commissioner. He's originally from Albuquerque, but has called Las Cruces home since 1996 when he moved here to go to NMSU. Angelica Valenzuela is the Clerk's Office Recording and Filing Supervisor. She's worked in the office since 2004 and has a passion for increasing access and knowledge to public documents found in the Clerk's Office. So now I'm going to turn it over to them.
Well, thank you. Thank you all very much for being here. We're really excited to give you this presentation and talk to you all about what the Clerk's Office does. Primarily because I think when you ask the average person on the street, what does the county clerk do? They don't really know what the county clerk does. Every once in a while, you come across someone that seems to know that the county clerk is the chief election administrator for the county, and we administer elections. And so my name ends up in the newspaper every once in a while talking about election results and things that are happening in that world. But it's not very often that people realize the work of the clerk's office really is different. It's much different than just those two things. I mean, it's different because it's always been. The clerk's office is one of the oldest offices, whether you know this or not, is one of the oldest government offices that's been created and tracked through history. And it's the basic idea of keeping track of the record of what's going on. And so we've had some fun with these stories in the past where we dig up stories of Greece or even before Greece where there were clerks. They weren't technically called clerks, but they were doing the role of recording information and keeping track of what's going on. And so whether it's ancient Greece or even before, county clerks or clerks have really been with us the whole time. Today, our job when it comes to recording documents is crucial to making sure that we have an organized community, making sure that we have an organized society. And when you buy a piece of real estate, it requires that we know the ownership history so we can track it down and look and make sure that when you're buying a piece of property from somebody else, that it's fair and that everything's legit. So the county clerk's really a crucial piece of the puzzle of a lot of things that happen in our community. Issuing marriage licenses, recording real estate deeds, recording probate records, business licenses. We've got a long list of things that we do in our office that most people just don't think about on a daily basis. And I think part of the reason that's the case is because we spend so much time talking about elections. And we don't spend a lot of time talking about everything else. But there's a lot of excitement in everything else. And so we're happy to have you here today because we're learning about that excitement. And it takes partnerships with folks like yourselves to really understand the value of the treasure that we have in our vault. And so thank you so much for being here with us today. And I'll tell you one thing that I really hope that you'll leave today with. I know that you may have your own personal interest in this presentation today, but I hope that you leave with confidence in the fact that we have somebody like Angelica Valenzuela as the supervisor of our recording and filing division, because her passion, her knowledge, her interest in the subject is really unmatched in the state of New Mexico, and we're really lucky to have her here. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Angelica. And thanks again for being here.
Thank you for being here. Yes, my name is Angelica Valenzuela. As said before, I'm the recording and filing supervisor. I've been working in the clerk's office for about 14 years. And thank you, Scott, for that introduction. It was nice and accurate, even if I do say so myself. You know, we've really tried to increase access to our old documents over the past few years. That's been one of our priorities. We're really excited that Eva reached out to us and asked us to do a presentation on the things that you can find in our records. When I started preparing for this presentation, I realized I really don't know much about genealogy and what specific information you might look for. What I do know is that the records that you'll find in the clerk's office, yes, you'll find the obvious. You'll find the marriage records, and you'll be able to tell what, you know, the maiden name was because they apply with their maiden name, and then you can research back that way. But there's also some hidden information that you might not expect, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. When Eva reached out to us, she suggested that we call the presentation Hidden Treasures of the Clerk's Office, and that was pretty accurate and kind of gave me the idea of where I wanted to take this presentation. So we're going to go over some of those records today, and I'm just going over a few. There's thousands of different types of records that you'll find, especially the old records. There's things that were kept then that are no longer kept, and so the oldest records are one of the most interesting. So when you think about the records that you'll find in the county clerk's office, I think what you'll find are things that will help you tell a story. So they'll help tell your family story, not just the names, not just where they lived or who they married, but give you an insight as to who they were. Like our newspaper records do that. What I did was go on to the Doña Ana County Genealogy Society website, and I saw that there were a list of past presentations, and a few of them really caught my eye. There was ways to enhance your genealogy research with old maps, getting the scoop on your ancestors in newspapers, all about land records, wills, and probates. And the reason why this caught my eye is because every single one of those records you can find at the clerk's office. Every single one. And so if you're wanting to access these, it's a one-stop shop. And all of our records are housed in our record room, what we call the vault. And if you remember the old county courthouse that we used to be located, the clerk's office was located at before, we actually had a vault. And it had the big safe door, and you had to open the safe and crank open that big door just to get in. And it was kind of like a 3-room vault. And we had our most recent in the first room with some computers to research, and then the second room, and our oldest docs were in the third room. And so when we moved into this building, we just naturally continued to call the room the vault. It's not a vault, but it's still fireproof, and it's still temperature controlled, which is a requirement by law for us. And it's significantly smaller. So we had to get creative, and we had to purchase some new shelving in order to fit all of our records into that room. But everything's in there now, and we still call it the vault. So if you come in and you say, hey, I'm going to do some research in the vault, everyone will know what you're talking about. If you say the records room, we might stop and pause for a minute. But in the vault, you will be able to access all the paper records that we have, so everything that's in books, microfilm, anything that's microfilmed, and there's computers so that you can access the electronic records. In your folder, I included an inventory of our records. And so they're kind of labeled as to how you can find the record, whether it's a paper copy or if it's microfiche. So that might be useful. And it's completely open to the public. There's also a record access policy in that folder. So if you're going to come in and do research, please read that policy just so that you're familiar with the rules. Don't expect you to memorize them, but that way, you're a little bit familiar and you are a little bit educated on how to handle the different records, the different type of records. So one of the things that I want to talk about in your list, there was getting the scoop on your ancestors' newspapers. And so our newspaper archives start from 1888, and there's a book there from 1888. That's the first newspaper that we have on record. And by law, we are the custodian for the newspapers, and so we have all the publishings from 1888 to now. Before, they used to have monthly publications. Then it seems like it turned into weekly, and now obviously daily. So every month we receive microfilm from the Sun News, and so if you want to research the newspapers, we have every single newspaper starting from 1888. For the county, yes, for the county. And it's in microfilm. We have a few newspaper books. We've preserved 2 of the oldest because they were in the worst shape, and all the others are microfilm. So we're going to talk about newspapers. Some of the things that you can find in our old newspaper records: birth announcements, travel announcements, and visitor announcements. And I thought that was really interesting. I guess the community was so small, they really cared about who was traveling, who was visiting. One of the I guess ads that I saw that caught my eye was a birth announcement, and it says, this is from May 19th, 1888. Mrs. James Kibbe presented her husband with another fine boy on last Sunday morning at Mesilla. All doing well except the father, and he'll probably pull through, as he was seen laying in a large supply of paregoric. Does anybody know what paregoric is? I didn't know what that was. You do. And so I Googled it. And it's a medicine consisting of opium flavored with camphor, aniseed, and benzoic acid, formerly used to treat diarrhea and coughing in children. Well, Mr. Kibbe isn't a child, so we can maybe guess what his ailment was. And I thought, what did he do to this newspaper editor to make them print that? What a birth announcement. What a story to tell to add to your ancestry. Some of the other things, travel and visitor announcements. Some simple, P.T. Penrose of Philadelphia is visiting his brother Spencer. We can assume maybe Spencer's last name is Penrose also, or everybody just knew who Spencer was. Phil Prague of St. Louis, commercial man, was in the city Thursday. A. McClintock, the big man from Rincon, was here during the week. But my favorite from this list is that last one. Dick Hudson, the best known man and jolliest fellow in southern New Mexico, is in the city. I thought, gosh, that was a good week, probably. So, but I mean, if you have ancestry that was rooted here 100 years ago, more than likely you're going to find something about them in the newspaper. I've even come across an ad for a lost shoe that a mother put in the newspaper because her son threw one of his shoes out of the buggy. And so she said, this is where we were at. If you find it, bring it back. So you'll find something, I'm sure. You'll find local news. This is from May 26, 1888. The school building was sold at public auction this morning from the courthouse steps and was bought by Numa Raymond for $1,585. The bidding was quite spirited. I can imagine. Does that mean there was a fight? There you go. They had a lot of paregoric. Another from Saturday, June 2nd, 1888. John Foy arrived here Sunday after an absence of 9 months, which have been replete with misfortunes. While in Mexico, he was a foreman of a mine. One night in January, while in the powder house, giving out the 60 workmen their supplies for the shift, a spark from a candle fell into a box of damaged powder, which also contained some giant powder caps. The powder began to burn, and Foy grabbed the box and made for the door, when the caps exploded. Luckily, he was far enough away from the half-ton or more of powder to prevent an explosion of the magazine. But the caps were shot into his body in many places, and he wears a glass eye as a remembrance of the accident, while the mines were left unhurt. John is loud in his praises for Dr. G.C. Barty, celebrated oculist of San Francisco, who treated his eye in a most scientific manner and showed him many favors. I thought that was really interesting. If maybe that was somebody that, someone was related to, what a story to add, to your ancestry story. Another one. I assume that there was probably a lot of gossip that went around in a small community. So this is from May 19th, 1888. Mrs. R.C. McKinney, who it was reported eloped with her cousin from Oregon, was in Las Cruces Wednesday and says that the sensational stories going the rounds about her are without foundation. She left her husband because he was a drunkard and abused her. While out at Oregon, his treatment became unbearable, and her cousin, Thaddeus McKinney, took her to El Paso and procured a situation for her in a private family. She was now on her way to get her children and will go to Rincon to live. Her husband, after spreading the false story of his wrongs, got mixed up with a horse and a rope that wasn't his own and has skipped the country. She has entered suit for a divorce. Property records. You'll find all the property records. You'll find easements. Warranty deeds are probably the most common that people look for when they're doing deed history. They look for real estate contracts, mortgages, things like that. So with deeds, what you can do is we have index books that are split up between grantor and grantee, and you can think of that as seller and buyer or giver and receiver. And so if you know a family member who maybe lived here at a certain time, you can search a range of years and search for them as a buyer, right? And let's say you think that they moved, you can search for them as a seller. Or you want to know what happened to the property. Did someone inherit it, or what happened? These two that I have here just have some little notes, because you'll find on the deed sometimes restrictions on the property, or just notes that people wanted to put on there. They wanted, people to know. But this one is the parties hereto, their heirs and assigns, shall have the permanent right and easement to use the present irrigation ditch running along State Highway number 28 from the community ditch to the above described premises, provided that the second party shall contribute their proportionate costs to the maintenance and upkeep of said community ditch. This is really interesting because they basically gave, like water rights permanently to their heirs. And so that's rare, but it's something that you can definitely find. A lot of times water rights are in the legal description of the property. And if you see that in the deeds, the large paragraph in the middle, that's the legal description of the property. And so that's, sometimes it'll tell you how much acreage it is. Sometimes it's very simple. It'll be, lot 4 in block B of, Terrace Heights subdivision. And those are nice because you know that there's going to be a subdivision plat on record. And so you can see visually what that property looked like. Another one, this one was interesting. I had never seen anything like this before. The carpeting is included with the real estate, together with all drapery rods and draperies and TV antenna. I'd never seen that before. But, you know, little notes like that. Sometimes you'll see that they granted a life estate, you know, maybe to their mother who is living there. So they're going to sell the property, but the mother's going to be able to live there until they've passed away. So, you know, that's some good information to know. Probate records. Probate records are probably the records that you're going to find the most unique information. You're not going to find the information that you find in the probate records, you're not going to find anywhere else. And the person who told me that was Dr. Rick Hendricks, the state historian, because he's found some really interesting things with writing books and things like that, things that he didn't find anywhere else or wouldn't have found. This is a probate for Dimitorio Chavez, and they have it here as D. Chavez. And he, from looking at the file pretty quickly, it seems like he was probably a wealthy person. It had statements of claims, which are bills to be paid by the estate. And then also there was listings of money that the estate was still bringing in. So it showed that he had a property in El Paso that he was collecting rent on still. There was also guardians that were granted for his children. So, you know, perhaps the spouse was already deceased and there was guardians, or from what Dr. Hendricks has told me, that the children didn't automatically go to the mother sometimes if the father was deceased or vice versa. And the court still needed to appoint a guardian, which was very interesting. But here there's a list of claims. There's merchandise. There's groceries. You know, tells you how much some milk cost, a dozen eggs. What else was on here? I saw some that said candy and cookies and cans of lard, things like that. And you know, I saw soda pop for a nickel, for 5 cents, things like that. Seems like he was a cigar smoker. There's a claim here from the International Cigar Factory. There's what looks like a water bill for $1.80. There's also a bill from the Dr. J.H. McLean Medicine Company. I thought that was interesting. There's that last thing down here. It's like a wonderful healing plaster. I thought, I wonder what that is. Maybe we want some of that. But there's all kinds of things. Medicine that I had never heard of. But those are the types of things that you'll find in a probate, besides, you know, who the heirs are. You'll find who the heirs are. You'll find where they lived, what properties they owned. They'll have a list of their inventory, so you can kind of get a sense of what they did for a living. You know, sometimes they'll have an inventory of what they sold if they were like a grocery merchant or something like that. Or they'll have, you know, large inventory of things for their cattle, things like that. Another thing that you'll find are maps. That was on the list of presentations that the society had previously. And what we'll have is property maps, obviously. Some of our older maps, you'll see the names of the owners on those maps. So like this one has names of the owners for each of those lots. And you can see what the property looked like at that time and how much they owned. Now the deed will give you the same thing, but it's written out, right? So it's gonna say, you know, 25 degrees south and 200 feet degrees. This provides you a visual, and also what the property looked like at that time before there were any structures on the property. So this will give you before any houses were built. This we don't see very often, but there is a couple of maps of cemeteries. So this is, you know, before obviously there were any plots. This is the map of the cemetery before anything. was issued. This is Memory Gardens of the Valley. I don't know exactly where this is, but I see on the bottom it says Highway 28. So we could probably figure out what their plans were and where this was going to be. Or if it exists now, I don't know. This is Hugh Stephenson grant subdivision of the Bracito tracts. And this was filed in 1907. This was interesting to me because my grandma lives in Bracito. And so I wonder if, her property is on this map somewhere. I'd have to do a little bit more research to find that out. I see on the side it says sand hills, and I know that there were sand dunes on my great-grandmother's property. And my grandma's here, and maybe she can verify this story. I heard that when they were leveling out the sand dunes, that there was Native American pottery and things like that found inside those sand dunes. And that my great-grandfather, called people up to come and pick them up. And I thought, wow, we should have kept some. That would have been so interesting to know about. But yes, so there, I see the sand hills there. So I thought, I wonder if the farm, we call it the farm, if the farm's located on this map here. It also shows the railroad right there. It showed on the bottom where the mail, I guess the post office maybe is, so this might not go too deep into Bracito. Other records, as I've mentioned before, the marriage records. And like I said, you'll find who got married, and you'll find the maiden names, and you'll be able to work your way back through there. Other things that you'll find is that we have the address, their address on there. So let's say that you have a roadblock, and there's no more marriage records that you can find. Well, let's say the last person that you found said that they resided in, another state, St. Louis or something. Well, that's a hint. Maybe, more of your family records are in that state. We have a lot of, and still today, we get a lot of marriages from the military. People from Fort Bliss, stationed at Fort Bliss, will come here to apply for a marriage license. It's faster, it's cheaper. And doing my research, we had a lot in previous years also. Here's a couple from 1944. And you had to give parent consent. You still do, if it's a minor. But I did see some parent consents that were saved in our marriage records for people that were already of age. But this is one, Western Union, that says, I am heartbroken. All we can say is yes. Wire us at once who you are marrying, love, mother. And that's from February 11th, 1944. So, and this applicant, he was stationed at Fort Bliss. So it probably wasn't uncommon that the parents didn't know who they were going to marry. There's another one, and this was a consent from the military, because you sometimes you have to get consent from the military in order to marry. And this is from the lieutenant, just giving consent that yes, this person can get married. We have another one. It's another thing that's not uncommon is for people to come in and apply for a marriage license and then never bring it back. We have so much marriage licenses where the application is filled out, but the marriage certificate is not. And so that's indication that they didn't bring it back for us to get the record, and they forgot, or they never got married. And a lot of times we do get people coming in and saying, I tore it up, I need another one. And so if they haven't gotten married, they can certainly purchase another certificate. But if they have gotten married, there's only one of the nice certificates, so they can't purchase another one. But this one is a letter Dear Sir, on May 24th, 1943, Lucille Willihan and myself, Ralph W. Deathridge, applied for a marriage license, and after we got them, she got mad and tore them up. So they are destroyed, and they were never used. I wish to have the record marked void or torn up. Respectfully, Ralph W. Deathridge. Other things that you can find, like I said, you have an inventory in your folder, but there's mining claims, there's a book of brands that I have there at the table, marriage records, Justice of the Peace criminal and civil document from 1916 to 1936. It's the only book that I've seen so far that has that information, and a birth and death record book from 1925 to 1945. Again, the only book that I've seen in our archive so far that has that information. There's a picture of the inventory. The other thing that I included in your folder is how to access documents online. And so those are going to be all the documents that we have electronic. Like I said before, we've tried to make access to these records a priority. And so over the years, we've done several projects. And so we're working our way through getting everything electronic. It's expensive and it takes up a lot of time. So, but we're getting there. And so I printed out a copy of these instructions. You can do it on our Doña Ana County website. You'll go to Services, Documents Online, and then you have to request a username and password. And then that username and password will be emailed to you. And then after you get that, you can go on to that online documents. If you want to sign up today for one, I've included this form in your folder. If you'll just fill it out and leave it with me, and we'll email your username and password to you. You'll enter your username and password. It gives instructions on how to search. I even gave a little bit of a demo there. And but if you have any problems or issues with it, I left my card also in that folder, so you can give me a call or email me. Yes, ma'am. No. That, like I said, that was the only book that I've found so far, and I think that it was probably a record from the physician at the time that was maybe jotting that information down. Yes. We're the custodian for the DD-214s. So when someone is discharged, they'll go and record them in our office. We are the recorder for that record. The issue with that is that they're not public record, and by law, we can only release that information to the veteran themselves, someone that they assign in writing in a notarized statement giving access to that record, or if they're deceased, then their next of kin can have access. It's in the state statute, so it's state. Mm-hmm. One of the projects that we've recently completed is a marriage license project where we scanned approximately 90,000 of our records into our digital system. Now the actual image is not available online only because we still have to ensure that we've redacted all the personal information that is on there. By law, we can't release social security numbers or the month and day of the birth date. And so we have to redact those and then put them online. You can have access to them in person, but if they're going to be online, we have to redact them. Yes. 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 Once we're sure that they're all redacted, absolutely. Yes. Right now, we're working on some historic documents from the 1850s to the 1960s, and this is a miscellaneous collection of documents. This is where the Pat Garrett coroner's report was found, and so we're still working on organizing that collection. Here we have a before and after. Now that first row of pictures there, those are like the birth and death record book that I was talking about. There were the criminal docket record book that I was talking about. All of that has gotten preserved. And so they went through a process of being cleaned, deacidified, and put in archival material and in a bookcase. And we've also had those scanned. So we have that electronic image of those. They just haven't been imported into our recording system. So they're not available online, but they're available upon request. The middle picture there is where is part of the collection where the Pat Garrett document was found. You can see that the records, especially the edges, are torn a little bit. They were folded probably for as long as they were created. Look, I think that we just got them from the third vault of the old building. You know, they were probably in a box and then put in this drawer and never touched again. So now we have them in folders, and we're going through them, and we're putting them in archival folders and labeling them and indexing them. It's a long process, but we're getting there. Like I said before, we've also done our deed books, and that corner picture is a picture of a map. And what they do during the preservation process is they take off any tape that was on the document. So this map was very, very well taped. And it ended up being in over 2,000 pieces. And so what they had to do was they sewed each piece to like a parchment paper that's in the back, because all the pieces weren't there. So there's still little holes within that map. But in order to place it all together, that's how they did it. They sewed it onto like some parchment paper in the back and then sewed each piece. We're not doing that ourselves. We've outsourced it to a company, and I'm not really familiar with what they use in order to take off that tape. Yes, ma'am. Yes, we do have maps available online. Not all of the old ones are available, and they're not indexed. But if you come in, we have paper indexes for everything, so you'll be able to find them there. Another reason why we do these preservation and conversion projects isn't just to increase access, but to preserve the information. So we've preserved our deeds from 1861 to 1931. We've done a film conversion of our deeds for 1932 to 1965. And so, you know, all the information for those years has been preserved. And we concentrate on our oldest documents. We won't preserve anything that doesn't need it just yet, because it is expensive. One of the reasons why this is important is because from 1624 to 1850, the most common way to keep a record was they used cotton, which is really good. That'll withstand the test of time. And then from 1850 to 1994, they started using wood pulp, somewhere in between there, and that was not good. That did not last. And some of the records that we have were made with that type of material. And that's why the edges are very fragile, and even handling them, it's very easy to tear. And now we use a combination of some sort of material, cotton and the wood pulp, and that's good. And I just want to do a quick demonstration. I'll have to use my other mic. Okay. And so if I take a piece of paper that we use today and crumple it up, you can open it. It's still legible. It's not torn. We're still okay. But if you take one of the papers that were created with the wood pulp, it's not as good. And so let me just demonstrate what can happen to our archives if they're not taken care of. If we crumple this up, it'll just fall apart. So when you see us at a county commission meeting, saying, we need funding for preservation or for conversion, that's why. It's really, really important. And so community support is also really important. So it was important to show you all that because we're really in need and we want to make preserving the information a priority. That's all that I have for you today. Thank you for coming in. After this, I can show anyone who'd like to come to the clerk's office. We can show you the vault and where the records are found and how you can access them. Yes, sir.
My family is mainly from East North Carolina, and there have been stories of where county records were burned or lost.
Yes, I'm not quite sure what was lost, but I know that in the old building there was a flood at some point in the basement, and they weren't records that are commonly accessed, and so that's why it's hard to tell what was lost. But there are definitely holes, like in our coroner's reports. There's several years that are missing, and so we can tell several years of different document types are missing. Any other questions? Oh, this one? I don't know. Do you know what that? Who that is? Who is that? Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question, though. We'll find out. Yeah, we should definitely find out, but I don't know. Yes, ma'am. Yes, we actually just recently applied for a grant-funded project from the Historical Advisory Board, and we were granted some money, and we were going to use that to help us work on that collection of historic documents that I showed you in the slide. We needed to hire someone to help us go through it because we just don't have the staffing to give the attention that it needs to read that fancy writing and figure out what the documents say. Unfortunately, we're unable to staff a person right now, and it's more of a bigger picture. We're part of a larger organization. We're not just the clerk's office, and so the hiring process kind of interrupted that a little bit. But yes, and it won't be the last grant that we apply for, but that is something that we do, yes. That one was state. Mm-hmm. Anything else? Okay, well, that's it. Thank you.